In this video, I'm testing the driver assistance systems in the Renault 5. I've also made another video where I go through the car both inside and out, and where I test the built-in software. You can find a link to that video down in the description. I'm especially excited to see if there have been any improvements in the driver assistance systems compared to my own Renault Megane, because I have an older version of the car's software than the one in this model. But before we hit the road, I just want to turn off this mandatory speed warning that's present in all newer cars. And fortunately, Renault has made it easy for me to choose exactly the settings I want in a simple way. If you go into the car's settings under driver assistance, there's a setting here called My Safety All On. And All On is what is selected every time you start the car, with all alerts active. But fortunately, you also have the option to create your own personal settings, where you can decide for yourself exactly which options should be active and which should be deactivated. So for example, if you want the speed warning to be turned off, you can choose that. What you then do when you get into the car, where All On is always activated, is simply press this button down here twice. And then My Safety Personal is selected. That's all you need to do. And then the settings are set just the way you like them. Now let's get out on the road. I've made it onto the highway. To activate the adaptive cruise control and lane assist, I need to press the round button over here. The car has different driver assistance systems, which I can switch between using this mode button. I can choose off, I can choose active assist, which basically includes everything. I can choose adaptive cruise control, or I can choose speed limits. And I usually just leave it on active assist, because then the car helps both with steering and with keeping a safe distance to the car in front and maintaining the speed. And once that's selected, the car remembers it. So the only thing I have to do next time I get on the highway and want to set my speed is to press this little round button, as I mentioned. And then it sets the speed to the current permitted speed. It activates lane assist and the adaptive cruise control. And then we're good to go. The car can automatically adjust the speed to the current speed limit, but unfortunately, the function is turned off by default. That means every time you get in and start driving, you have to turn it on manually. It's the same problem I have in my Renault Megane. There's actually a toggle in the menu where I can say that I want the function enabled, but it gets deactivated every time I turn off the car and start it again. It's the same here in the Renault 5. Fortunately, it's relatively easy to turn on. I just have to hold down this little round button here for about 3 seconds, and then a little A appears down here, which indicates that now the car automatically adjusts its speed to the signs. So it's really not that big of a deal, but I don't understand why they don't let it stay active all the time, like most other manufacturers do. You could say that if you find such a function really annoying, then maybe it's an advantage, but if you're like me and think it's a nice feature to have, then it's a bit annoying that you have to activate it every time you get in, even though it's relatively easy. As mentioned, the car automatically sets the speed to the allowed speed on the stretch when I press this little round button here. And if I want to change that, I use this plus and minus toggle over here. If I give it a short press, I increase by 1 km per hour, and the same if I press down, I reduce by 1 km per hour. And if I hold it down, it jumps to the nearest 10 km per hour, so it works just like in most other cars. It's relatively easy to adjust. If I want to set the car to the current speed I'm driving, instead of setting it to the allowed speed on the stretch, when I activate the assistance systems, then instead of pressing this round button, I just press set on this one instead. It basically does the same thing. It also activates the current assistant and sets the speed to what I'm driving right now. If I change my mind and want to set it to the speed limit for the stretch, I can just press this round button again, and then the speed will be set to the allowed speed here. So it works really, really well. If I want to change the distance to the car in front when I'm using adaptive cruise control, I press this little button in the middle, and each time I press it, I change the distance, and I can choose between 1 and 4 car lengths. Now let's see what the adaptive cruise control does if I'm behind a slow-moving car and signal that I want to overtake. It should ideally speed up as soon as I start indicating, so I can pick up speed before I'm fully out in the passing lane. Otherwise, I risk being caught up by the cars coming from behind. Some systems don't begin to accelerate until I'm completely free of the car in front. That way, you can't reach the right speed in time. Let's see what this one does now. If you look at this little white line down here, the whiter it is, the more it's pressing the accelerator. So you can see how much it's pressing the accelerator. Now I'm activating the turn signal. As you can see, the car promptly pressed the accelerator pedal as soon as I indicated that I intended to perform an overtaking maneuver. This immediate response is crucial, and allows the car to efficiently and effectively pick up sufficient speed, ensuring a smooth and safe transition during the overtaking process. So I avoided getting caught by the cars coming from behind. Unfortunately, the adaptive cruise control also overtakes on the inside. It doesn't keep an eye out for slow-moving cars that might be in the outer lane. It just continues at the speed you've set, so it's not really performing like some of the better systems. Now that we've seen how the adaptive cruise control handles overtaking, let's also see what happens if I have to pull in behind a slow-moving vehicle in the inner lane, maybe quite close, if, for some reason, I need to pull in quickly. So what does the cruise control do if I suddenly have to slow down significantly? Let's try and see. It does exactly what it's supposed to. No big warnings or emergency braking. No, it just brakes and keeps a good distance, so that's approved. We also need to see how good the Renault 5's lane assist is at detecting the lane markings. That is, how fast it finds the lane again when I change lanes. The car can't change lanes by itself, so I have to do that manually. But that's why it's interesting to see how quickly it finds the lane again and starts steering. Now I'm signaling to move into the next lane here, which turns off lane assist. Now I turn off the indicator, and it's found the lane. So, relatively quickly. I've experienced a few times that if I just do a short flick of the indicator stalk, the car takes a bit longer to find the lane. We can just try to do that now. Once I've passed this bus here, I'll signal back in. Now, I'm centered in the middle of the lane, and there it's found it. It's maybe half a second or something like that, but it finds it reasonably well, so it's not catastrophic, but it's also not the fastest I've experienced. One thing I also like to test is how the car's lane assist, that is, the auto steering, handles lanes that are either wider or narrower than normal. If you've ever driven south through Germany, then you've also experienced those roadworks that stretch for many, many kilometers, where you might only be allowed to drive 80 and where the lane is significantly narrower than usual. In those cases, it's really nice if the assistance systems can help you not only keep a safe distance to the car in front, but maybe also steer for you, so you can just lean back and keep your hand on the wheel. But not all cars are able to handle that. For example, my Renault Megane doesn't like it if the lines aren't spaced far enough apart, but I'm curious to see if it's gotten better in this Renault 5 with the newer software. Up ahead, there's a stretch where the speed limit is 80 and the outer lane is only 2 meters wide, so let's see how it handles that. Yeah, as soon as I actually entered the designated lane, it simply disengaged. It can't figure out how to effectively steer because there's just not enough available space between the painted lines here on the road. That's truly unfortunate, a real shame. I had genuinely hoped that they had fixed that particular issue because many of the other electric cars I've tested recently can competently handle narrow lanes like this one without any problems at all, so I'm very disappointed that Renault still can't handle that. Lanes that are considerably wider than usual is something you quite often encounter at various motorway on-ramps and entry points here in Denmark. And that's generally not a problem for electric cars today, but my first electric car, which was a Fiat 500e, couldn't really handle it. So that's why I always test it, just to be sure. But actually, all the cars I've tested since then haven't had any problems with it. So I don't expect the Renault 5 to have any issues, because my Renault Megane also handles it just fine. But let's just check, just to be sure. The lane gets a bit wider here. And the Renault 5 just keeps following right in the middle of the lane, which is also what I expected. So just like all the other electric cars I've tested since my Fiat 500e, it can definitely handle it as well. If the adaptive cruise control and lane assist have been deactivated for some reason, for example if I've braked manually, which turns off all the assistance systems, I can reactivate them in two ways. I can either push up on this little stalk, and then it sets the car's speed to whatever I'm currently driving at. Or I can press the circle here and then set it to the permitted speed for the stretch of road, and both options will also activate the active assistance system, that is, lane assist, if that's the one I've selected. The adaptive cruise control also works all the way down to 0 kilometers per hour, which is really nice when you're in stop-and-go traffic, like I am right now, because then you can just lean back, keep your hand on the steering wheel, and let the car handle the rest. Here on the country road, I can test how the lane assist handles more hilly terrain, where you might not be able to see the lane markings the whole way, like here, for example, where I'm driving uphill. And on this stretch, I can also test how good the car is at adjusting its speed to the current speed limits. It handled this hill just fine. So let's see how the rest of the test goes. Up here, the 60 kilometers per hour zone ends, so I'm allowed to drive 80. Let's see if the car can figure that out. I've now passed the sign, and now it realized I could drive 80 kilometers per hour. A bit slow, I think. It could have done that a bit faster, but at least it had the correct speed limit. Now we'll see how it goes the other way, and with the other changes further up the road. We're now moving from this 80 kilometer zone and into a city zone. The car should ideally know that in advance, so now we'll see if it manages to adjust the speed. Yes, I can see that it has put up a little 50-kilometer sign down here, and it's already starting to reduce the speed, so that when I reach the city limit, I'm also driving 50. So it actually adapts to the road layout and the speed limits in advance. That's just really great. Now we're coming to a section where the speed limit changes. First to 60, then to 70, and then the 70 limit ends. So that means we can drive 80 kilometers per hour. Let's see how it goes. Here comes the 60-kilometer sign. I'm passing it now, and here the car automatically changes the speed to 60 right away, just as it's supposed to. Very good. Now we're approaching the 70-kilometer sign. It's now passed and the speed has changed to 70 kilometers. Now we come to the end of the zone, where we can drive 80 kilometers per hour. So let's see if it happens just as quickly, or if there's a bit of a delay like before. The sign has been passed, and this time it changed to 80 kilometers right away. So maybe it was just a coincidence that it needed a little extra time before. Here at least, it worked exactly as intended. It changes the speed as soon as I pass the sign. By the way, a small detail here in the Renault 5 is that if the auto steering for some reason disengages, the car makes a little boob-boob sound. It actually doesn't do that in my Renault Megane. That's something new that's come with the newer software. I think it's quite nice, because if you're not paying attention, you might not notice that the car has stopped steering. There are actually a lot of cars that don't give any warning sound. Apparently that's not so modern, but they actually do it here, and I think that's quite nice. Now we're coming into a 50 kilometers per hour zone, and the car already knows that. And a bit further down the road ahead, there's a roundabout coming up into view, so let's see if the navigation system knows about that particular detail too. Yes, it does. It shows a roundabout sign here, and it starts to reduce the speed even more as I enter the roundabout, so that I don't go into the roundabout too fast. And now I'm exiting the roundabout, and then it increases the speed again. So again, really well done, approved. It's just like I know it from my Renault Megane. It's really nice that the car automatically adapts to the road in advance and helps me maintain the right speed at all times. The reason I really like that the car adjusts to the course of the road and the speed limits in advance is, for example, if you're coming from a country road into a city zone. Now, this is a stretch here where I'm only allowed to drive 60, but I could also be on a stretch where the limit is 80, and then you enter a city zone. When I tested it in, for example, the Xpeng G6, which doesn't adjust the speed in advance, I ended up far past this automatic speed control up ahead, so if it had been more than just a warning, I would have gotten a ticket. But that doesn't happen with a car like the Renault 5, because it adjusts the speed in advance. We also need to see what the assistance systems do if I don't have my hands on the steering wheel. The Renault 5 has a pulse sensor in the steering wheel, it has a touch-sensitive wheel, so it can detect if I have my hand on it. But what if I have a medical emergency and no longer have my hands on the wheel? What does the car do then? It should ideally try to alert me to it and, in the worst case, stop. But not all cars do that. So let's try to see what happens here. Now I'm letting go of the steering wheel, and the car is driving itself with adaptive cruise control and lane assist active, also steering by itself. Now it's trying to tell me to keep my hands on the wheel. But I'm not doing that. Now it's giving an audible warning, and it's lighting up red down here and saying keep your hands on the wheel, but it's still not stopping. Now it's tapping the brake. It's tapping the brake again. And now it's activating the hazard lights, and it's stopping the car. I'm just keeping an eye out to make sure no one is coming from behind. It's bringing the car to a complete stop with the hazard lights on, and now it's beeping even more. So that's completely approved. That's exactly how it should be. If it were to be better, it would also pull over to the side, but this is very good. There might also be a shoulder it can't see that I could drive off onto, so it's okay. But the fact that it's trying to get my attention in every possible way to make sure I intervene, that's great. And if I still don't intervene, it reduces the car's speed to 0, but not before it has turned on the hazard lights to let the cars coming from behind know that something's wrong. Perfect. That's approved, Renault. The last thing I usually do is see how the lane assist, that is, the auto steering, handles on smaller roads where there might not be markings on both sides and where the road might curve a bit more. None of these cars are anywhere near full self-driving. It will probably be a lot more years before we get there, if ever. But it's a very good way to test how much the systems are actually capable of, how good they really are at identifying the lane. So let's try turning onto these small roads here and see how it goes. I'm activating the assistant, and then we'll see if it can find the lane here. Here I only have markings on one side, and then I have a grass verge on the other side. But it has actually found it. I've actually had problems with this in my Renault Megane, so it seems like it actually might be a bit better in this version of the software. And here it also knows that the city sign is coming up, so it's already starting to reduce the speed. And it's steering me very smoothly and precisely through the gentle curve of the turn here, even though there are no visible lane markings or guides present on both sides of the road. At this point, it looks like it momentarily lost the lane, but it quickly managed to find it again and is continuing to steer the car. So we've reached the last part of my lane assist test stretch. It's this little stretch of road where the speed limit is only 40 and there are a few sharp bends. But so far, I haven't managed to get the Renault 5 to find the lane here. There are actually clear markings here, but it just doesn't seem to want to pick them up. I don't know if it's because the lines are too close together, but the lane isn't that narrow. It surprises me a bit, because it actually did pretty well earlier, when there was only a shoulder on the one side, but here there are clear white lines on both sides. But it just can't see them here. I've also just tried driving the other way to see if maybe it was the direct sunlight that was confusing the car or something, but apparently that's not the case. It simply can't find the lane here on this road. Possibly because it's a bit too narrow, I don't know. But that's just how it is. So my week with the Renault 5 has come to an end, and here comes my overall assessment along with a few extra details I've picked up along the way. I still think the Renault 5 is a truly charming car, and I'm a huge fan of the fact that you don't have to compromise on software and assistance systems even if you choose a small city car. Unless, of course, you choose the cheapest model. I've been thinking a bit about why Renault are not even offering the Google-based Android Automotive, lane centering and intelligent adaptive cruise control in the cheapest model. And I think it's because it's intended purely as a city car. That is, for you who never drive outside the city or go on longer trips. Because if you don't do that, you don't really need the car to calculate arrival state of charge or charging stops, or keep you centered in the lane and adjust the speed to the course of the road. So in that way, it makes sense. You just need to be aware that you are completely opting out of that, unless you go for the techno or iconic models. So if you need it occasionally, it's better to choose one of those models. In those, it also makes more sense because they come with the larger battery that gives up to 410 kilometers of range. That's almost as much as in a Renault Megane, and it's actually enough for you to go on long trips in the car if you want to. It's not as comfortable as in a Megane because there is definitely more noise in the cabin in such a small car, but it's absolutely doable, especially when combined with the excellent Google-based navigation. On the other hand, I'm disappointed that you have to pay an extra 5,000 to 6,000 kroner for the car to keep you centered in the lane because that's really nice on longer trips and it should be standard here in 2025. As for the driving assistants, they don't seem to have been noticeably improved compared to my Renault Megane from 2024. That means they work fine, but not quite as well as the ones you get in, for example, the MEB cars, Volkswagen, Audi, Skoda, Cupra, and so on. Especially the lane assist is not up to par. It's slower and you need to drive 60 to engage it, which is why it didn't work on the small road. And narrow lanes, well, it can't handle those at all. I also find that it often disengages if the road markings aren't completely clear, but at least now it gives a little sound when that happens. The rear-view camera, which you get in the Techno and Iconic models, could also have used a bit more investment. It has a really low resolution and doesn't match the rest of the car, which in no way feels cheap. On the other hand, the Renault 5 outshines many other manufacturers, even larger cars, when it comes to CarPlay integration. because just like Xpeng, they've implemented map display in the driver's display when you use navigation via CarPlay. And unlike Xpeng, the map is shown in the center of the display, just like the car's own navigation, and without the image being unnecessarily cropped. It's super nice, but I'm still annoyed that I have to buy a new car to get it for my 1-year-old Megane. I think it's exciting that more small electric cars are starting to appear, also at prices below 200,000 kroner. The new Dolphin Surf, which I test drove a few weeks ago, is just another example. It's also smart and offers a lot for the money, but on the other hand, I don't think it's nearly as charming as the Renault 5, and unfortunately, it's also not available with a battery as large as in the Renault. And yes, the Renault is built in Europe, which for some will also be a big plus. There is no doubt, however, that the Renault 5 is bound to be a hit because it has just the right combination of design, brand, and cool features. But it will undoubtedly also face quite a bit of competition in the coming years, as the market for small electric cars is starting to pick up. Later in the year, for example, I'll also be testing the new Hyundai Insta, which is yet another electric car in the small segment. So remember to subscribe to the channel if you're interested in that, or in tech and electric cars in general. If you haven't seen the video about the Dolphin Surf yet, it's right there. And if you'd like to support the work I do directly, I'm always happy for a cup of coffee. See you soon!